Well, we have a quorum, and it's 4 o'clock. So I'm going to call the meeting to order for the Finance Committee for the 4th of April at 4 o'clock. Just a reminder, I think we're being videoed. I think we're being videoed. I'm pretty sure now that we're being audioed, and so we'll get underway. Minutes arrived in your packet, which is a summary of what we did the other day, and I have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Unless there's anything else that we want to discuss, the purpose. Hey, Henry. Hi. The purpose of getting together was really to sort of recap's not the right word. I like to call it what went right, what went wrong. And it's just a holdover from doing this for many, many years after something large, maybe not so large, had taken place. And so I'd like to just have a free-flowing discussion, engaged with you guys. What should we be thinking about next year and the process? We perhaps might like different outcomes on things, but that's probably nothing we can preordain. But how do we make the process work for us and work for the town, and how do we make our process fit the needs that Libby and Brian and the rest of the town has? So anyway, so with that, this is informal. I wish we were around the table instead of sitting up here, but have at it. No, and you can't just sit over there. And no, that would be fine unless somebody here wants to
I would start, but for obvious reasons I won't. I wasn't there, so.
Well, no, we're not talking about the town meeting.
Oh, okay.
I'm just talking about the whole process that we went through, basically going back November, December timeframe leading up to town meeting. Now, I mean, we're happy to talk about town meeting, but I don't think anybody really wants to.
I could start.
Yeah, go ahead.
I started writing about 4 letters to the paper after Maria keeps telling me don't send that in.
And I guess it's more out of a little bit of frustration, just relevant to some of the budgetary things, specifically about want to comment when at the nth hour there was a Board of Selectmen that I had attended. I'm great that we do have separation between the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen. I think that's a good thing because we don't rubber stamp. But my frustration, I had heard one of our select people had thought, why is the FinCom getting involved in issues on budget or making changes or making cuts to the operational capital? And so that was one item. And then there was a letter that was circulated relevant to by a department head asking for clarification through town council on that same issue. And I found that to be a bit concerning as an operator myself on how long-tenured elected officials and long-tenured department heads don't understand some of the workings of budgetary process, of the process of our community. And I think some of that is concerning because we put a lot of effort, I think, here at this table, and it may be small minutia items and maybe large items. We put a lot of effort into our decisions, and I think we do try to digest the numbers that are put in front of us, good purpose, both from a capital side and an operational side. I do that every day for a job and get paid for it. So I still have some questions specific, and I don't think I'll ask them here openly at this meeting about process, because I really strongly feel that some of the things that we did are contrary to what the Commonwealth of Massachusetts says specifically about enterprise funds. And I don't want to chase down the wrong path. I want to be educated myself. So I guess my whole little dialogue is all about it may make sense to not only educate our citizens as best we can prior to a public meeting called the ATM, But I think it should start from us and department heads and administrators and legislators all being educated on the same level. Because as I started my little dialogue here, I saw a BOS person ask in an open meeting why we were challenging an item, and I saw a department head asking the same thing, and shame on both of the people that are long tenured, not even understanding that process. So
So your issue isn't that they, challenged.
no, that's what we're to do. Challenge is good word.
So
It's
more
understanding
the
the process.
process that they went through to do that.
I mean, I'll follow up on the same theme in terms of my reactions to having gone through this once now. I was a little, but the biggest surprise for me was people seeming to not understand the role of the finance committee. Some people, and I think a little bit of that was selective understanding. Sometimes people don't understand what they don't feel like understanding at the time. And it brought me, and I thought, just backing up and stuff, I thought the whole process, others may feel differently, I thought it was run, the several months of process, I thought it was run great. I actually don't have any comments on it. These guys were terrific in terms of the answers they had for us. I thought the whole thing went very well. But I was surprised both from exactly the examples you stated, and just even others, and talking to people in the community about the lack of understanding of the role of the Finance Committee. And I'll tell you what it actually brought me back to, what I think would be helpful is Mike's article. And if I knew then what I knew now, I would have actually argued for the passage of that article, because I think that would actually help, not from kind of where we started that conversation of overt pressure from the selectmen, to change this, but just from a broader community understanding and of every piece along the process of what the Finance Committee does, which I think would make the process run more smoothly. So probably not the kind of things we're looking for.
That's actually an interesting. So, I'm going to look at you there because you're the longest tenured person in terms of this. Do we have the right understanding what the Finance Committee is supposed to do, or are we actually going off and treading into, either an area where we don't have charter under the state law? And Brian, same question to you. I mean, because you've been dealing with.
General idea behind FinCom is to review budgets, capital projects, monetary items that are brought before town meeting, analyze and review them and provide a recommendation. Sometimes it takes four of them. I don't know that the policies would change with change of appointment, but maybe we could. Just trying to think of how to get out there more with FinCom's goals, and I think sometimes, I think the people who are in town government know full well maybe we need to put it in the voters' stuff. Maybe we need to do a little bit better of an intro about what the FinCom motions are all about, why there's, the push for that motion or this motion, and put an excerpt from the bylaw in there about what exactly is the FinCom doing. Otherwise, some people just don't pay attention to it until they do.
Right.
But in the end, I think the FinCom should, we're supposed to be no small discussion about the water project. That was a lot of discussion, all public, probably anyway, if you took a video or the minutes or just for the fun of a meeting.
Well, go ahead. Sorry. I realize I'm late, and I don't think this was discussed because it was just something that you brought up, that everybody in government knows what FinCom does. I think that flies in the face of the action that the Board of Selectmen took on our CPC recommendation. As I understand it, the CPC makes a recommendation, and then it's subject to our review. And it may be that in the memory of the sitting board members, the memory of the sitting board members extends as far back as CPC goes. So maybe it's never happened before that there's a line item veto. But if that's not within the purview of this committee, none of us are made aware of it. And I don't think that that's probably statutorily correct. So I don't think that everybody understands, and maybe, Peter, as you suggest, sometimes there's a selective understanding about where the FinCom's role ends. I know that we ran into a similar situation 3 years ago, was it, when we talked about the impacts on various parts of the town that development on Old South Road would have. You know, it was, well, this is a planning issue and not a financial issue. Well, there weren't dollars attached to the zoning changes, and there weren't dollars attached to the proposal in general. But we thought that there were, and I think the case is reasonably made, that there are far-reaching financial impacts of what we were talking about then. So then it would come back under, this is what the Finance Committee is supposed to do prior to town meeting. But we get into these boundary discussions regularly. So maybe it needs to be, I mean, maybe we need a better understanding, or it needs to be restated somewhere. Hey, this is what the charge is.
So one of the things that has shown up just sort of talking with people and stuff that's been written is that people feel that they don't have enough time to read and understand what's in the warrant, and at least allege that they sit out the vote on certain items. Now, they could fall asleep for the zoning, and that would be totally understandable. But on the other hand, we also, so either good testimony to the faith that they have in the Finance Committee and the town in putting the budgets together, but we passed, what, $130 million worth of budgets, enterprise funds, and operating general funds, and the enterprise, and other than the water company, capital budgets, and, you know, nobody wanted to talk about them, which is okay. I mean, we could look at that and just say, you know, great job, everybody here on the committee, and that, suggests a lot of trust. But it also begs the question, should we put less time in on that part of the process and more time in on some of these, a lot of them are citizens articles, but some of these things that I think we gave a lot of discussion to the non-budget stuff as well as to the budget stuff. I think we did a good job of focusing on the important, reasonably highly leveraged, articles. But should we put more time in that?
So somebody made the point to me yesterday, an observation really. They were at town meeting, and there was a woman a couple rows in front of her who said to her friend, after one article or another that was sponsored by either the Planning Board or the Finance Committee got shot down. He didn't remember the specifics. But the point's the same, that nobody, in her estimation, trusted their leaders, and she attributed that to, an extension of what's happening in national politics. And, we live in this post-fact world where, people can stand up and say things, and then it's also written on Facebook, and somebody also heard it at the grocery store, and now there's 3 sources, and now it's a real thing. And so, they put a hard 40 minutes into studying an issue, and, maybe we put in 14 or 40 weeks in it, but it doesn't matter, because we each have a printout of approximately the same number of pages that's read and seen the same number of days in advance of town meeting, and that's what it is. I mentioned to you yesterday that I think we need to do a better job at messaging what our stance and what the homework is that we've done on an issue. And I occasionally read old editions, decades-old editions of the Inquirer and Mirror, and the Finance Committee used to do a dry run of town meeting, and they would, separate from Board of Selectmen, separate from everybody else.
Separate from the Civic League.
Separate from the Civic League, so they sat there and they went through every single article, and people would come. I think it was at the American Legion they do it, and I don't know how many people came, maybe not many. But we have the benefit of video now, too, and we could do that, and we could talk about how we came to every decision that we came to. And maybe it's an hour and a half, maybe it's a 3-hour discussion, but you can break every one of those conversations up, and we could tag them, and we could have them online. And now, days, or we finish our deliberations for the large part, for the most part, weeks in advance, and people can, get our perspective and hear from us and hear how we arrived at everything. all ahead of time, because it's not possible, especially in the face of emotional arguments. It's not possible in 5 minutes or 2-minute rebuttals or 1 minute here. We can't make our case in the same way that we can in these meetings. And I think there's a reason that we're set up with 9 of us, and there's a reason that we meet for months and talk at length about these issues, because they can't be wrapped up in short discussions on town meeting floor.
Libby, were you around when that was?
No, but, the public hearing used to be a little longer. Like, it wouldn't be just of 1, 2, 3 English. It would be more of a, hearing on every article. Now, that is completely taken, and you haven't reached your motion. So, I don't really remember a lot of time, but also that many members.
I think it was like 60s era. Like, I think I was interested in how did we come to build our town building at 16 Broad, and I think that was the time where I saw this was going on.
Well, for my money, the public hearings are only being done for statutory reasons. They're absolutely, all of our public hearings are a waste of time. Sorry, everybody listening. Only because they're not really public hearings. I mean, there's no discussion that takes place. You get to say in 2 minutes, and a bunch of stony-faced people sit up here, whether it's us or the selectmen or everybody else, listens, and, there's no, so, we certainly, I don't think, we're going to have to continue to do public hearings, but I don't think we should depend upon those as a way to go about it. Go ahead. No.
No, I was just going to follow. I think the thing I came away, certainly at the end of the day on Saturday, was most disappointed at was the lack of preparation and the lack of understanding on the part of the voters in the meeting, on the roles of any of their public officials, be it volunteers or elected or professional. That whole thing on what was it, Article 75. I was just flabbergasted that people were tired, and I'm confused, and it was just kind of a fiasco, and a shame that all the work that goes into it, not necessarily even by us, but all the work by Brian, by Libby, by everyone else that goes into preparing that meeting, and there were people that were sort of whimpering that it was, gee, I'm sort of confused, I want to go home. And then
So, one thing that comes to light is, and a lot, but having our own Twitter account and our own Facebook page, and then at the end of every meeting, or before every meeting, say 2 days before, hey, FinCom's meeting on this, and here's the agenda. Here's the link to the agenda, and please come and discuss. And then after the meeting is done, someone can say, this is what we decided. Here's the link to the video. And people will post and comment on it, because I think mostly what I heard is people felt like they weren't heard, or that we can debate the ideals of democracy. This is why it's an unideal system of government, because anyone can just get up and say anything they want and sway the public without fact, as Steve is pointing out. But if you give them that forum in advance, maybe these naysayers will, type their firebrand, FinCom decided to strike down OIH funding on Facebook. Here's the link to the meeting. And then, 50 people will comment underneath it. But at least they'll just feel heard.
So sometimes I think that, getting information out is helpful, but then I think about having years, literally years, and lots of consultant reports and work group reports and minutes from meetings, dozens and dozens of meetings over the course of years. And then we're still in a rush in the 60 days running up to town meeting to say that we did our due diligence on the Island Home siting.
Yeah, so I guess let's say we had an account, right? Or let's just say we had a public forum besides the town webpage where people could actually comment on these things, not here to the
I
stony
think they
faces.
do. I think it's Facebook, and the fact is nobody cares about it until 2 weeks before town meeting.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is if you did it at every meeting, there is a noticeable record of a place where everyone is, and someone can say, hey, I'm going to go now to the next meeting and bring up my problems with FinCom instead of not knowing about it or not paying attention to the meeting postings, whatever. But at least you have that ammunition of saying, well, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. Like,
Yeah. I mean,
there's no
I-
hidden meeting here.
yeah, I think we have to take the island home out of, we don't want to design a process around what
Yeah.
happened at our
No.
island home. And
Clearly.
And personally, while I was disappointed that the voters, didn't follow our recommendations on the water company and to a lesser extent on the school, I mean, I guess that happens. Okay, but they did on everything else. So, are we trying to figure out, maybe our universe of trying to educate is a lot smaller than we think, we think it is. And at some point, the voters are going to have a different viewpoint than we do, and that's.
I think that
That's
where
fine.
we got, where town meeting didn't go along with our recommendations is where they had philosophical differences, and that's okay, I think. I think our job is to be the fiduciary representatives for the town, and this is in our estimation, this is the best decision, the smartest thing to do. But when you put a motion into it, things can go a different direction, and I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is when there's a lot of passion on one side, and there's more speakers on a side of an issue, and we have you making our logical case, and then that's it, and then the meeting goes in 100 different directions, and they haven't had time to hear the more considered full body of approach.
So that's a good point. And so I didn't consider it my job to, in our role, and as my role as spokesperson for our committee, to get embroiled in the argument.
No, and I don't think
I
it
mean,
is.
I gave the facts as we looked at them. It was relatively attenuated, but they were there, and I don't
that
think
is
people
appropriate.
felt we
Yeah.
hadn't given due thought to it.
Well, you might think about, again, how town meeting is sort of structured. I mean, considering my gripe that so many people seem to, barely open the warrant before they showed up, it might not be such a bad idea to, after the Pledge of Allegiance and all that sort of thing, having, whether it's Sarah or, the FinCom stands up and says, the town meeting voters should probably know that since December 12th, the meeting is, the FinCom has met, whatever we did, 22 times, 50 hours. We've considered we've had public hearings on this, and this. We're recommending, positive votes on 82 of the article, whatever it is, and so you sort of set the stage and remind the voters, and I feel the same way about the planning board, who gets whipsawed back and forth every time I've been to one of these meetings, where they've spent hours and hours in public meetings and probably dealing with way more emotional, tossing back and forth from the various protagonists on these issues, zoning issues. They've worked so hard on this stuff, and whether you agree or disagree on their decisions, they've come to consider decision, and they're making that recommendation to the town. And I just, again, I was just driven crazy the number of times that all that work, and they get sort of acted like they were trying to, hoodwink somebody.
Well, that's kind of, I guess, my point of putting it in a public space such as Twitter or Facebook, because then there's a record of that work. Every time you have a meeting, every time you do that work, you post a link or something for someone to then know. Because I feel like people don't, like you said, like they don't know or they don't come to these meetings, and so these motions go unnoticed until the day of. And then there's, they can still follow online the meetings, even though they're not there. And they can still make comments.
I think time is a very precious commodity. There was a bunch of grumbling, and please forgive me, about the lateness of the arrival of the warrant. And yes, I know people should go to the website, they should read it ahead of time, but there's something, I suppose, comforting about having the warrant in hand and being able to go through that, even if that individual doesn't totally understand what's in there. So there's immediately a negative approach to town meeting, which then translates into mistrust. And that's what I think, as you said, Stephen,
is there a possibility, so our part of the warrant that we spend our time on is, I mean, and part of the reason we looked at restructuring it, I mean, we have, what, 50 articles, 40 articles? I mean, we have a 110 article warrant, but, you know, an awful lot of it is stuff that we don't have a real primary role in. So, you know, one question I would have for you guys is there an opportunity even in those 40 or 50 articles to collapse some things? Get rid of some articles, not get rid of approving them, but collapse them. So we start to shrink the warrant for all intents and purposes. So the articles that do appear that are important aren't, you know, people aren't forced to go through as many of them. And yeah, you're going to skip over some of the reserve funds and things like that, but could you even get rid of, not get rid of the approvals, but shrink them, put them into more of an omnibus article?
Actually,
like
it's-
Articles 75.
Yeah.
And just as a corollary to that, the order in which the articles fall on the warrant has always mystified me. Are they in order that they're submitted, or I mean, why isn't it organized like town financial issues, citizen articles, zoning articles?
It is.
I mean,
It is.
Yeah.
It's financial, and then it's zoning, and of the different categories, if there was a citizen financial, it goes into council, zoning, general law, they are categories.
We took our Island Home zoning out of order, but other than that, they were in
Well,
categories.
Island Home was a large money appropriation, a large money appropriation, general.
No, he said
No, we
zoning.
took we took the zoning one out of. Didn't we take?
Yeah,
it?
but that made
Yeah,
that
no,
made
no,
sense.
no. I agree. I'm saying it wasn't order.
Companion article,
Yep.
Yeah.
something like that.
I agree.
well, I stand corrected, but even though I've been to this is the third one I've been to, I never realized that. It always seemed to me that there was like a couple of these articles, and then, oh yeah, you gotta go to number 88 for the, and I guess I didn't realize that was the organization.
Sometimes, there's an article that might relate depending on what happens to it, or not relate on it. For example, the Island Home somehow relates that to 75. That, so there's sometimes there's a thing like that, but I don't think that's not the norm necessarily. We could certainly talk to town council about the collapse of some of these articles, it's more like one.
We could think about you could put the reserve fund in Article 8 if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And you could take the OPEB and we could put it in Article 8 and
I would just,
I mean, but-
I would just be a little careful about that.
Yeah, what are we talking about in terms of, I mean, some years we've had, 115, and some years we're down in like the high 90s. I mean, but did that make any difference? Like, does it, I mean, what kind of condensing can we do on numbers, and will that make
Well, I
any
guess it
difference?
depends on whether people are complaining about not being able to read the warrant because it is so long. Is it a complaint about all the zoning articles, which are obviously very lengthy, or is it an observation / complaint about the fiscal articles and some of the others?
Yeah, I think in addition to the number of articles, it's the number of pages, and I think if you're combining this stuff, we're not reducing the number of words it takes to get the job of all this work done.
What if
It's
you
going to be the same
bifurcated
document.
and you culled out, which they already culled out, and you had an ATM for planning and zoning, and then you had an ATM for calling all financial.
We've talked
Talk about
several
that.
times about that, and having a fall town meeting for zoning only.
Well,
I don't know that we've actively tried it, but I haven't gotten total consensus on it. And it seems like at the annual, even if we say we're gonna do zoning and special in the fall, they somehow infiltrate the annual town meeting, it can't happen.
You can't stop a citizen petition, so if they wanted to
Correct.
do one for zoning or whatever, I mean,
Well, clearly, when you saw the lunch break, even before that, you had some of your people started to leave, and then it got to be where your audience shrunk. And to me, that's a message. Why did the people stay who
Because they
stayed?
were there
Why did
for
people leave who left? You know,
hey, can we just get the rest of the master plan done in one giant article next year, and just say, We just
As
get one
Article
shot at it.
175.
Well, I mean, 7 hours of legislation. I mean, why not split the meeting in two? Do it in 2 days. I mean, that's just voter fatigue. You know, who wants to sit through that? You know, it's,
But the other side of that, having sat through the first one 3 years ago, going 2 or 3 nights, the opposite is after everybody's worked all day, who wants to sit there for 4 hours and try to make decisions? Either
Yeah.
you have voter fatigue
I-
that way.
I'd
Saturday
prefer
and
10 hours.
Saturday and Sunday.
I don't, you wouldn't get anybody on a Sunday, I don't think, to be honest with you.
I mean, no less. I heard on Saturday afternoon there was 200 people.
There were very few. It was a
So, what's the
monsoon. There were
difference?
flooded basements. Who knows? Lots of confounding variables there.
I,
Make the quorum.
From a financial articles perspective, I mean, I certainly understand where Peter's coming from and where you guys are coming from on some of them, but if you look at it, I think that how many ever people were there generally trusted your rationale regardless of when they got the warrant, because in my time here, very few financial warrant articles have ever been called. Okay. There was nothing that anybody was ever going to do about the Ireland home article getting called. That was going to be called no matter. It didn't matter what your recommendation was. Somebody was calling the article to have the discussion. You know, I think that, you know, I think because the whole CPC thing, I mean, I think it just is maybe was more born out of there hasn't been a lot of time where you guys have made substantial changes to an article that has been presented from a financial standpoint, you know, because you've been able to then come to a comfort level with what's been presented. I mean, we obviously had 2 scenarios this year that were different. I think the water company in and of itself, I wouldn't get I think you and I have had some conversations on this, Peter. I mean, I think it's just a situation where they wanted a building and he was going to find a way to go to town meeting no matter what, to be honest with you. And that's, you know, I don't know that I would look at that and say, what could we have done differently? Because I don't think we could have done anything different. Personally, you guys spent an awful lot of time on it. You spent an awful lot of time on the budget. I mean, I don't know that there was a lot different that could have been done. From my opinion, sitting here and having gone through numerous town meetings between the 2 places that I've been, I don't think you could have done a lot different than what you did, to be honest with you.
Well, is there a more proactive approach? I'm not saying that we need education, but is there a better way that we can help as a group, you know, administration, work with the managers, and tie it together without micromanaging?
a few, maybe one of the directions you're going. A few years ago, and it may have been quite a while ago, I was told that individual FinCom members sort of worked with different departments and got to know their operations a little bit more intimately than just having them come before us. And I know other towns do that. Was that effective? Was it just too fatiguing on people, Libby? Was it resented by the departments?
Did it turn
I don't
political
really think so. In fact, half the program has recently attempted.
this year?
Yes,
We did
yeah.
that.
And personally, you know, depending on what the FinCom liaison or rep or whoever wants to do, I think it's probably helpful for them to get to know the operation a little better, because when it comes time to talk about budget or project or some kind of departmental request, you'll know, at least one person here will know just as much about it as us and can help advocate for it, or, and or talk to the department officers about the
But wouldn't it be better if they just said, you know, CPC is an advisory committee, and then Finance Committee is also an advisory committee, and we just choose not to accept rather than that's not your role?
Yes, and I'm not,
No, I'm not putting that on you. I'm just saying that that would be a better thing for, you know, future boards, future committees, the public to understand that it's not that we stepped out of line. You know, they're not, you know, slapping our wrist and saying you didn't do the right thing. They're just saying we disagree and we value this more.
sometimes in the past, after town meeting, this hasn't happened that often, but it has happened where FinCom and the selectmen have a joint meeting like this to have a discussion about what you said, what went right, what went wrong, what people's issues might be. It might not be a bad idea for the FinCom to say, whatever.
Yeah, I just, on the same, I actually think the process worked pretty great. I mean, I agree with the dialogue leading up to it. You know, the FinCom not allowed to look over here and not allowed to look over here. Retained earnings aren't theirs, and CPC, that is ludicrous to me. But I don't look at those two take the island home and put it aside.
Yeah.
The other two articles, I don't look at it as a failure at all. I look at, we did our jobs. We looked through a whole ton of stuff. We said to the town meeting voters, look, here are a couple of things that you got to look at. You know, as you're dealing with this 110 pages, focus your attention on this because it deserves some attention. And other people got up and made their say. I thought you did a good job of representing why we reached the decision we did. I thought, frankly, some people who had an opposite viewpoint made some pretty good points. And the voters made their decision. I think we did their job. We brought, you know, we shone the light where it needed to be shown, and they reached a decision. So I don't take away from those examples at all that there was a failure in the process.
On the CPC, I particularly irritate me, but I thought it was unfortunate to suggest that the CPC does really detailed work and really studies the articles, and implying that we did not spend the time doing it, that it was a very much more reactionary. And we can look at the CPC tapes, but I would suspect we probably had a more substantive discussion about the windows than the CPC did.
Well, it's just, if I may, it's a crazy notion to suggest, well, what about all the other departments we look at? I mean, we sit here and we question all the operating. You know, they all spend a ton of time scrubbing their numbers, right? Every piece of data we look at, somebody has focused a ton of time on. So to single that out as a reason for us to not put our attention there, it's I don't understand.
Well, I think on that, I hate to harp on $250,000 on an $80 million budget, but it was more, why is the Board of Selectmen so far on the left and we're so far on the right? We're missing what each of us, what changed our mind? What did they focus on that we didn't? And clearly, you could see that. That's why I tried to articulate myself and failed. I failed to ask why. Why did you make the decision?
The initial reaction I heard at the meeting was, the FinCom shouldn't be looking here.
See,
Yeah.
I think, you know, I think the committee made the right decision on that one, even though I moved to go ahead. And I feel like there's something more going on there in terms of, with the respect to town administration and the selectmen's strategy on what they want to do with that building, and they wanted the 250 in there. And I mean, I guess I would have thought in a perfect world, Jim Kelly would have called you and said, "Listen, here's our strategy," but maybe that's not the way it works. And I did want to close. I mean, I wanted to compliment you, David, and sort of get way back to the very beginning of why we're having this conversation. I do think, having this been my third series of going through this, that the way that you organize the meetings, I think the focus, trimming down the number of meetings we had. I thought the Saturday meeting, in terms of going through the various departmental budgets, was a good way to work it. Certainly appreciate the support of everyone on town administration and all the department heads who came and gave up some time on a Saturday. But I really think in terms of the way we worked our process, it was a good year. And I think we focused on the things that were important and spent the time on the important things. And so I think from that perspective, it was an improvement over the past years.
Because we're going to leave here at 5 o'clock, so we have 17 minutes. Let's talk a little bit about process for next year. and what is possible and isn't possible. So, and please weigh in if on thoughts that you all might have on process. But out to you all, how realistic is it to give very specific dates and put them in the calendar in September or October of when specific items are going to be heard by the Finance Committee?
September's too early.
No, put it in the calendar in September and give it to everybody for January, February timeframe. So let's do the human services guys who were really late getting to us. So if we said we put in the calendar and distributed it in September that on February 3rd there will be a FinCom meeting, and on that agenda will be human services.
Yeah, I think September is a little bit too late for that, but October would be fine.
To put a calendar together, September's too early to put a calendar together for the winter?
Only because it sounds very easy, but right in September, we're really consumed with capital, budget, and the ATM calendar for the BOS. I usually try to set aside more like, that early timeline sort of thing is, there may be some dates in December, but FinCom's not gonna approve them on December. So we haven't,
All right, so let's take the September out of it. I mean, the real question is just scheduling everybody ahead of time for a specific date so that they have a hard stop on when the work has to be done before it comes to us. So I don't care if it comes out in October, it just shouldn't come out in January for,
yes, I agree.
So-
Human services was so the farther ahead these groups know when they're coming, the more they should prepare for their own time.
right, and it would give more flesh to the calendar you put out by saying, a date specific, this is when we're going to do it. If we decide we're going to do Saturdays, which I hope we do again, and maybe we can make that decision right now, we schedule that Saturday right now. So we know that it's going to be, it sounds like, just because of Mass Municipal, that the Saturday we did it was the right Saturday to do it.
Yeah.
And that Thursday worked, I thought, pretty well for the enterprise funds. The value that I saw from those 2 days was the ability to see, unlike prior years, all of the budgets in a really compressed period of time. And, rather than spreading out over 5 weeks where you forgot what you saw, 2 Tuesdays ago.
As long as I can fund the breakfast. Can I fund the breakfast, you sure?
You didn't like those honey
No, I
buns
loved
with
it. But you shouldn't have to do it every year.
Oh. Hey, you guys got up. Stephen ended up getting stuck with the funding
with
the coffee.
with the
'cause
coffee,
He
right?
told me he was there and he'd pick it up. I hadn't paid for it.
Good.
So thank you, Stephen.
Is there anybody you want to meet with earlier or later?
Well, we have a new DPW person. We'll have, in theory, a new Wattacomet person.
People.
That's what I heard. I had people run after me after that meeting on Saturday. Even Steve Butler ran after me. That was a good thing. Seeing him run, I was like, what are you running for, Steve? And who else do we have? Anyone else new? Any other department people?
Is there any talk yet of a special town meeting?
Come to the selectmen's meeting tomorrow night.
Just the drive one run, what about doing that between this committee and the Board of Selectmen?
You mean going through all the warrant articles beforehand? First of all, is there appetite from members of this committee to do
Right.
something like that? I think that we finish our process well enough in advance of town meeting that, if we leave out all the things that we're waiting on to say we support the planning board, if we just focus on the stuff that we're making substantive motions on and just held our meeting on those issues, I think we could have our dry run, or whatever we call it, weeks in advance. And I think that people would really benefit from that.
I'd be willing to do it. I don't think we need to do it for the entire warrant, but I think a section on, the general fund and the enterprise funds, a discussion on that, and then picking up the important articles, and then having, recording or snippets, and having, whoever wanted to participate do
Yeah.
that. I think I think it's worth trying. I mean, if it turns out that nobody looks at it, then
Right.
at least we made an attempt. I think it would be helpful. The other thing is, I think in the past 2 years, the Civic League has not had anybody from the Finance Committee at their meetings. I mean, they pick the articles they want to talk about, and they get the article proponents, and, they're.
Well, our
I mean,
issue.
I was at this year. I don't know that I was. No, I think I was at the one last year. They just
There's
didn't
an
have it.
artificial constraint on their time. They think nobody wants to be there after 2.5 hours, and maybe that's true, but it might not be true. And maybe it's too much on the Civic League to require, or not to require, it's too much on their board members to want to do longer or want to do more events or whatever. But I think we could take it upon ourselves to talk about the other issues that aren't covered. So I'm glad to hear that people think it's worth trying. I hope we do it.
Yeah, so taking what Henry mentioned about Facebook, and just dawned on me that, wasn't it the Conservation Commission put a flyer in the Inky Mirror that week and made recommendations on land council?
Land council does it, yeah.
Is there any reason why, again, I mean, for 100 and something articles, I don't think we need to express individual opinions, but is there any reason why we can't take an ad out in the week or 2 prior to the Inky Mirror, and if there are, let's just say there are 4 articles or 5 articles, including something like Island Home, the next time around, that we explain our logic sort of publicly in something that gets broad readership here on the island, right before the meeting. Are we allowed to do that?
Yes.
I mean, because when you think of it, and again, just use Island Home may be a bad example, but just to use as an example, the opponents, if you will, or the work group, Francis Cartona's work group, had been, winding each other up and working on this for weeks and weeks and weeks. And yet the audience, and had an opportunity to educate and to state their case to the island for weeks in advance, whereas both administration and for that matter, the selectmen and us, you sort of, it's on the floor of the meeting, and just wondering whether there might have been worth sending out that, or again, I'm thinking Island Home as the example, saying, we've proposed to adopt this article. We think it's right for the island for these reasons. I don't know if that's being political. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the challenge is where you become partisan. And I think the great strength of the Finance Committee has always been that we're a pretty non-partisan group. So the dilemma becomes, at what point are you advocating and what point are you?
Well, we are, but aren't we advocating? I mean, part of the role of the Finance Committee is to put those recommendations in the article, and we've talked here about how, in many ways, the town accepts our recommendations on a lot of things.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's, I don't know, maybe it doesn't work.
I don't know if, I think that legally you probably should spend money on advertising an article, but I don't know if people would really, people aren't in favor of much of the issue of spending money doing that. I have to really think about that.
Can I
What do you think?
I know what
I'm
you're.
not even saying advocating. I'm
Yeah.
wondering whether, for
Edu-
for articles that are
educate.
sort of, not every single zoning article, but articles that are significant, where you want to say, well, we voted to adopt Island Home. We felt it was
Yeah.
fiscally prudent. I don't know, whatever.
Well, why couldn't you do your own version of the articles? Have it taped
Well, and I think that's what.
a bunch of times.
I think it was
like
Stephen was
someday
suggesting.
after you've got all your motions finalized,
Yeah.
you could pick the ones that are, that were kind of discussed significantly here, and you could have a discussion
Yeah.
forum, and that it could be played multiple times before town meeting, be available on the website.
And I guess that's my argument for a social media presence, is that it allows people to comment
But you have to be careful with social media presence, because if you get more than X number of you commenting or answering questions on that social media, it would be.
We wouldn't comment. It would
Okay.
just be
Okay.
Town of Nantucket Finance Committee tonight decided to support the island home, and then people can, here's a link to the meeting, and then people can blast away.
But
they can comment as much, and then
I
sometimes
feel like
we'll
the
post
town
something.
already has that, and I'm not sure it's appropriate for any board or committee to have that for themselves,
Why not?
because we're not our own entity. Like, we are one part of the town. Big
Yeah, I guess what I'm hearing a lot of comments is like it's a communication issue between us and the public, and that's just a huge free form.
Well, I don't know that we have a huge communication issue. I mean, that's what I think we have to be careful. Just, we, have what's called recency bias on this issue. We had
Right.
Yeah,
issues on Saturday, and now we're trying to solve a particular problem. I mean, I think that what we, in the broad category, education, or helping people understand or help them get the information, is what we're really, I think that's what we're really talking
Well, but
about.
I guess that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. It's like, so all this information's already there. It's just not in a form that people use.
But it's sort of up to them to use it to some degree.
Right.
I mean, I do think we're getting way ahead of ourselves, and we're getting way out there on an advocacy thing,
Yeah.
where I think, I'll say it again, I think it largely worked on Saturday. I think all of our meetings are taped. They're on live on the website. We have public hearings, right? There was a whole bunch of accessibility to the process of the board. There may be, one more meeting in terms of education, but getting out there and taking and pushing for positions, I think, is
Well, I'm not
not
pushing for
the place where
positions.
we
I'm
wanna
just
be.
saying we decided this. Here's the link, and you're putting it in a place where people actually look versus burying it on a town website that no one, no offense, goes to. So
Can I have one item that I just would like us to at least get out there for the town? So, how realistic is it and maybe this is a discussion I need to first have with Kelly, but to have the town set a very specific budget number for the departments. We spent $82 million last year. We're not just going to say we're going to spend $82 million plus 2.5%, and be very specific, even though I know you may not have all your certifications in, be very specific about the capital that's available. We have a capital fund this year of $6 million. And so put some constraints on it. And maybe you do this and I'm just not cognizant of your inner workings, but I sometimes come away feeling that it's much more of a bottoms up. Whatever you guys need, and then we'll try to fix it and make it fit into the quarter-ton pickup truck, even though we've got, a half-ton worth of things. And so, again, this reflected more for those of us that ended up being on the private side. This is basically how it works. You don't get to pretty much decide how much money you want to spend. Somebody usually sets a budget target for you, and then we have to work it in, and the same goes on the capital side. So that we're forcing constraints on the system, and we're forcing people to make choices and presumably address priorities that way rather than trying to find money. So
We can, why don't you let Brian and I talk a little bit about that? Theoretically, we have capital improvement lays out. So we're close to do that, and obviously some conversations on top. But sidewalks, we want to sort of drop something else, put that in, or fund it for it. So, I think we are getting to the point soon, maybe that goal of fiscal 19, to be exactly that. Capital improvement X fiscal 19, that's done.
that's all the money.
Figure out,
But I think it's the other part of what you said that may be a little concerning, which is figure out another. If it doesn't fit within $6 million, whatever the number, we have to figure out another way to pay for it.
Yeah.
And I guess what the thought process that I have is force much more of a constraint and really force the decisions to be made and the priorities to be established, rather than put a little bit of a squeeze with people knowing that they can go to an alternative source of financing their projects.
I think I meant more like, if the roof goes off a building and we have to
Yeah,
do another like $100, something unusual. But I agree with the priority we need established.
so. Anything else? We're going to get a meeting sometime before the end of your fiscal year, I assume, to make some transfers?
Yeah, we'll do 2 West Monroe, and do 1 before, and then 1 right on.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll only need 1, but
Okay. So we'll hear from,
yeah, I would expect there would probably try to be 1, we did 1 in June last year.
yeah,
And then just very minor cleanup for anything that was unanticipated. But we're working with the departments right now to try to annualize what those expenditures look like and figure out an idea. Hopefully we took care of the majority of that.
yeah, okay.
Did you have a quarter end? When? What month?
Well, the 3rd quarter ended 3/31.
Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, that's a good start.
David, thank you. Great year.
Well, thank you, everybody here. Some of you are, terms are up. Hopefully you're,
I just wanted to say, I was really pleased while I joined Tiffany's term. It was enormously instructive and informative, but of course I realized how little I know at the end of the process. But thank you for being a particularly patient committee chair, and thank you to all the committee members who were there to keep nudging. So,
well,
very
thank you
much.
to all of you. It's been great, and greatly appreciated all the work and the support. And I've said it before, I will say it again, you guys were terrific. Thank you very, very much. And this is my 5th year, so Cliff's not here, so I'm the longest tenured person on the committee. And I remember when I started, and I had hair. But we've come a long way, and it's been in large measure to the work you guys have done. So thank you.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Second.